Business owners of Reddit, what's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit had to be fired over? Years ago, like in the 90s, my husband worked for a small company. He did a little bit of everything, and one of his jobs, along with a co-worker, was keeping all the computers running. Now this was a sales-based company, so all of the salespeople had laptops for themselves. If there was an issue or problem, they'd bring them in to be looked at. So, one day, one of the non-local sales guys was in for a meeting. He said, "Hey, my computer is running really slowly. Can you take a look at it?" My husband says, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Sales guy leaves the computer and goes to whatever meeting he was off to. My husband and his colleague take a look and see that the disk is nearly full and figure that was slowing things down. They dig deeper and see the computer is filled with pee. Like filled with it. Pee of all sorts. Nothing illegal per se, but very close to it. Now, mind you, the salespeople signed an agreement that their assigned computer was for business use only, not personal use. So, we have a slight problem here. My husband and his colleague, not wanting to make a mountain out of a molehill and not wanting the guy to lose his job over a fixable problem, just wiped the drive clean, reformatted it, got things set up again, and the computer was working great. The guy comes back the next day and my husband goes, "Hey, sales guy, we took a look at your computer. It was running slowly because the disk was nearly full with personal files, so we wiped it clean, reformatted things, and you're good to go. You know, just a reminder that our company issued computers are for business use only. If you're looking for something for personal use, here are some relatively inexpensive laptops with a lot of storage space. You can put whatever you want on it. Small investment for privacy, you know." And with that, they gave him a printout list of some good, reasonably priced laptops he could purchase for himself. The sales guy just kind of mumbled something, grabbed his computer and was on his way without so much as a thank you. Well, the guys figured that was that, but guess who was back 6 weeks later with a not working at all computer? Yep, dumbass. Problem? Yep, computer was again filled with pee. They were done at this point. The two of them went straight to the president's office, showed her what was on the computer, well enough to give her an idea, and explained what had happened previously. She was a very no-nonsense lady, so needless to say by 3 PM that afternoon, that sales guy was no longer employed. What an idiot. Makes you wonder how people like that have gotten as far as they have in life. I had to fire someone for trying to start a console war with an 8-year-old who really liked Nintendo, while the former employee was a die-hard Xbox fan. He didn't even try to be playful about it. He was downright cruel to this poor kid. Was just having a conversation with my granddad about when he used to own a business. He told me the only employee he regrets hiring was the son of an Army NCO during the Vietnam years. Apparently, this guy was a great candidate and seemed enthused to be applying for his first job, 18 at the time. My granddad offered him a job starting the next day but warned him if he drove he'd have to move his car every 2 hours to avoid the street parking fine. Anyway, he showed up to work the next day and set about learning the ropes. After 2 hours my granddad tells him to move the car so he doesn't get in trouble. This kid goes to move his car and never comes back, much to my granddad's annoyance. Anyway, being the son of an army man himself, granddad calls in a favor and tracks down this kid's father. He tells the guy what happens and gets the kid's address. Apparently the father said to beat the crap out of the lazy rascal. He goes over to find this guy smoking pot with his girlfriend and drinking a beer, and the only explanation he offered was that he was bored. Needless to say he didn't have a job and never got paid for those 2 hours. Not a business owner, but this happened to one of my co-workers. Guy was extremely nerdy, and this is from a self-admitting nerd, and absolutely obsessed with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally the only things he would ever talk about, and would talk about them for as long as you let him. One day I'm on register and I see him being dragged out of the store by cops in handcuffs. Turns out he had been shoplifting tons of playing cards of those above listed games, at least $500 worth, as our store policy was to let an employee get away with it up to that amount before busting them. I think because the charges stick harder or something. What sucks is that at $500 he had only barely started a competitive Magic deck. committing no notable offense, but faking incompetence or causing inconvenience in order to be fired and receive severance pay. You know what they say, fake it till you never make it, or something like that. Turned up drunk, fell asleep at the desk, harassed women in the bar after work. After we fired him, he hung around outside the offices, came back and loitered a few days later too, then sent me an SMS, "You ruined my life, I'm going to ruin yours." 5 years later tried to connect on LinkedIn, and a recruiter asked me for a reference. WTF, A+++, great worker, would highly recommend. Oh wait. I worked at a call center that had one of the managers fired for sexual harassment. He showed up and just sat in the parking lot the next day. Cops were eventually called, and he left. I'm pretty sure he just was afraid to tell his wife what happened, so was pretending to be at work, but better safe than sorry, I guess. I was hiring for a government contract that required everyone to be drug tested. I told the guy in the interview that he would be drug tested. Hired, failed the drug test, fired. When I told him he failed the drug test, he said, "Yeah, I knew I would." Mobile home parks. Guy was hired. On day 0. Day 1. His 18M. Mom calls and says he got carried away with the celebrations holiday and woke up and found himself in jail. Day 4. He's out of jail and shows up to work first time. Day 16. Advise me if he ever doesn't show up for work. Call the jail. If he's there, then there is a roll of 20s in his drawer labeled bail fund. Please get him out. Day 30. Took some Xanax he had obtained somehow without telling us. I give him the job to use the tractor's front end loader and load my dump trailer with debris we were cleaning. Is be back to dump it. Xanax kicks in. He ran into the same house 5 times with the tractor. Finished the job and parked the tracks inside the barn mostly. Day 40. 3 AM a tenant calls about the maintenance guy having fire and rescue at his house. Lived on site. Evidently he had gotten drunk. While vacuuming behind the couch, he managed to flip it over on him. He couldn't get out from under it but could reach cell phone and called fire and rescue to come get him out. And they did. Day 51. Gets drunk. He's a minority. Dresses up in a KKK outfit and starts walking through town in the park in his outfit with a shovel for a flagpole with Confederate flag on it as his Halloween costume. Somehow makes it home covered in eggs etc. Day 71. Alcohol-based termination. Now he's doing well and steady job etc. Probably the funnest person to work with and very productive, believe it or not. Roll of cash for bailing him out. Well, at least we know he is practical and realistic about his future. It's funny and sad at the same time. Edit. Typo. Left an open, half full can of one of those spiked seltzers in his locker. The lockers have transparent doors and he left it unlocked. His explanation? He found it on the side of the road and he was planning on recycling it later. What a guy. It's not every day you see someone with that kind of commitment to sustainability. I worked with a girl in retail who just could not arrive on time. Even with a 5-minute leniency rule, she still couldn't get there on time. We had a pretty generous tardy system. 8 tardies in 6 months and then termination after that. We were having pretty high turnover, so this girl had more than 10 and no one had said anything to her. She even admitted she was usually on time but would sit in her car and talk on the phone and end up late. Or decide to hit a drive-through knowing she didn't have time and end up late. One day she comes in, late as usual, and immediately gets called to the store manager's office. We assumed she was getting fired, but it turned out she was simply getting warned. In that moment she decided to ask the manager if her tardy from that day counted. He fired her on the spot. Not a business owner but was a job site crew chief when this happened. I worked in restoration. For fire losses we would pack out an entire house or affected area. Soot, smoke and burned items. This one job the woman was a hoarder and one of my techs who was 37 finds bottle rockets from the late 80s and thinks it was a great idea to shoot them off in the customer's yard. Of course, since they are so old they are duds, but he fires like 5 or 6 of them off before I told him to stop. The next day we had a part-time kid who was like 17. He shot one off, even after I told him not to. So the neighbor tells the homeowner and the homeowner calls our owner to complain. When he writes up the 37YO he tries to justify himself because a 17-year-old who is young, new, really stupid and did it after he shot them off. So they both ended up getting fired. Don't mess with customers' stuff. It's not worth it. I don't own a business, but one of my friends once quit a job I got him at the place I work because it was too easy, even though he wasn't even doing half of the things he was supposed to do, and the few things he was doing poorly. I've let friends know about jobs at my workplace. I've also not told many people about jobs they could do, but I wouldn't want their work performance reflecting on me. I own a small business that I run, and one time this employee quit because he got bit by a squirrel that a customer threw at him. Why did a customer throw a squirrel at him? Not a business owner, but I was a supervisor at a factory and got my buddy a job. 3 months in and he was doing a good job, and I was thinking about going to my boss to talk about promoting him to a level 2 job. It never came to that because he came in one day, went straight to my boss, and told him he's quitting by saying I just need to look for better hours. I really think I can get paid playing softball. 3 years later and he still hasn't gotten paid. About a year ago, I hired a guy who was down on his luck. Went against my best judgment. Due to the nature of my business, I usually don't hire people that fit his profile. Out of shape, poor hygiene, etc. It wasn't long before I started hearing complaints from female employees and clients. Turns out that he would often attempt to flirt with women, and when turned down, he would lose his mind and call them terrible names and insults. I don't tolerate that crap, so I gave him a very stern warning. The very next day, I found one of my sweetest female employees visibly upset. Upon inquiring, she said that the dipshit had followed her home yesterday to make sure she got home safely, then showed up this morning to escort her to the office. She was genuinely scared. I called him into my office and told him to scram. He threatened to file a complaint with the Department of Labor for discrimination against men who have an innate need to protect women. Didn't matter. Told him to beat it, and now I'm fighting the stupid claim with the doll. This is the first time I'm hearing that men who have an innate need to protect women are a protected class. Bet it's the first time the Department of Labor is hearing it too. So my dad ran a small side business as a logger, and I was his foreman whenever his main guys couldn't show. It was nice when I was able to skip school and make money at 13 years old, but this came with a drawback. Not many grown men respect the authority of a teenager on a job site. Well, one day, we're out of state and don't have any of our usual crew, so we decided to knock on some doors and hit up some homeless shelters to see if anyone wanted to make some money for the day. We put together a 3-man crew, excluding us, and we start the job. Now, since we weren't an above ground business, it was really important that no one get hurt, so safety was priority above literally anything else. So I was the only one allowed to use the saws on the ground. Along comes Captain Big Shot. He knows everything already, so I couldn't teach him anything. All day he's been back talking me whenever my dad was up in the tree. I'd tell him go left, he'd go right. I'd tell him to get to work, he'd tell me go frick myself. I tell him not to use the saw, he'd scoff and keep using it. Charming guy. I'd resolved to tell him to hit the road after lunch. When my dad called break, he pulls out the tailgate coffee maker and we take a load off. My dad walks off to take a pee and Big Shot tells me, "Hey kid, make yourself useful and refill your old man's saw." Now, maybe it was my teenage hormones, but I got a little pee. Sorry, did I say a little? I was freaking livid. Butthole, you don't tell me what to do. You've been talking crap all day. Hit the road. You're fired. We got into an argument that consisted of, "You can't fire me," followed by, "Frick you. Yes I can." My dad comes back and asks what's going on. "You gonna let this kid fire me without missing a beat?" "Yeah, you're fired. Get out of here." He asked me later why I fired him and agreed. He was the only one on that crew that had a problem with me. The rest of them were just happy to have work. It's actually really sweet that your dad backed you up like that. No questions asked. Not me, but my dad. His worker asked if he wanted to assist in making M. He no longer works for him. PS. Him and his girlfriend got busted for making M. Serving 5 years. Worker. Serpa said Pikachu face JPG. I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners for a day. We drove around in a van and knocked at doors. The driver owned a franchise or something, so he would come in and close the deal. I sold one on my first day. I called him and he came in and asked the buyer if there was anything he did not like about the deal. Of course the buyer said that the price was a little high, so the franchise owner knocked off my whole commission. His reasoning was that if I sold a couple more I would be in some higher commission rate or something. I said frick that and took the tea home. Hounded him for weeks. He finally gave me the money after I showed up at his house at 1:30 AM. Frick him. What an butthole. Not mine but my parents. A customer asked to have his key cut and an employee said they couldn't cut that type of key. My dad caught the customer on the way out by accident and asked what he needed help with, eventually to tell him they could cut that type of key. The employee yelled at my dad and said, "If you ever second guess me again, in gone." He walked out the door a week later because my dad second guessed him. Some people. Employee was videotaped smoking a joint by a temp while on the clock. Employee figures the truth will come out or the video will surface eventually, so he confesses before we knew the video existed. We're relatively liberal when it comes to marijuana, so we demoted him and put him through substance abuse counseling. Upon completion and a negative drug screen he can resume his normal duties. Fast forward 2 months. Employee's position is reinstated. Everything is going well. Until I walked out to the patio one day to find a marijuana plant growing in a flower pot. The flower pot is in clear view of a security camera. Roll the footage back several weeks and there is said employee pulling seeds from a bag, placing them in various pots around the patio. He was let go the next day. A home ec teacher I worked with had potted herbs in her culinary classroom. She worked in a rough junior high and eventually noticed sprouts that, well, let's just say they weren't the herbs she had planted. The kids thought they were being so clever. Was not my company but a store I was suddenly put in charge of when they fired the store manager. It was a store in a mall. The district manager was in town, hence the firing of the store manager, and decided he needed to hire another employee to fill the hours until he could find a useful manager. I wouldn't be manager, but I was the only employee of the store left. Well, this guy, we'll call him Danny, was notorious for working for nearly every store in that mall. He's worked at 5 different stores at separate times in the span of a year or less. Half the mall knows this guy and no one really likes him. He's your classic 30-year-old spoiled dude who lives with his mom. Our moron of a district manager decided he'd be a good addition to the team, against my protests. So he was trained in by the district manager and his final day of training was the day the DM was supposed to fly out. The next day the DM flies out and instructs me to give him the key to the door so he could open and close by himself. His mom also worked in the mall and he helped her out part-time at a survey place, where they bug you to take a survey and offer to pay you like $2. So I went down to the survey place and tried to give him his key. He refused, said the job was too difficult for him. We bought gold, and it's not actually that difficult, and I spent most of my days actually playing WoW in the corner. Told me then that he quit and would not take the key. Then I had to call the district manager and tell him that he refused to take the key, said the job was too hard, quit, and I was still the only employee of the store, and I was part-time. Hired a girl to answer the phone and sweep up real quick before close. Literally 10 minutes of sweeping max a day if you were slow as all crap. As far as the phone goes, there's literally nothing we can do for you on the phone, but customers have some sort of problem with not having a phone for a business, so she only had to say hello, hear them ask whatever it is and say some variation of "I'm sorry, we can't really do that over the phone, but our hours are such and such and you can come on in and we'll get you taken care of." This bee made $100 a day to mostly sit around and play on Facebook or whatever she wanted. Instead she chose to stand outside talking to her unemployed boyfriend on the sidewalk all day. The one day a week she'd actually show up and she wouldn't even take the phone with her. I would still answer it. Then close came and she'd be nowhere to be found. About the 3rd week of, well, I guess she doesn't wanna work here, I go to fire her butt and she starts hitting me with the "I'm pregnant. You can't fire a pregnant woman. It's illegal because the stress could kill my baby. If you fire me and my baby dies, I'm going to sue you for everything you have." It was so satisfying to watch her face unsmug itself as I said, "You remember that contract I kept trying to get you to fill out? The one saying I hired you? Yee. You don't work here. Frick off." Also, she wasn't actually pregnant. Cause your stress killed her baby. My husband was a contractor for a long time before moving to another industry. It was a small op, just him and his dad plus a couple employees intermittently. My husband had gotten a contract with the local Lowe's to do some installations and needed more help. Enter this middle-aged man who had all this experience. Right away, my husband got a bad vibe since the dude had been doing it so long but didn't own any of his own equipment. He ignored it because crap happens and maybe the guy just had some bad luck. He was on for a few weeks, doing great, no real problems. Since he had experience, my husband decided to make him a crew lead over some small projects. During this time, the guy had possession of some of the equipment my husband furnished for the job. This is important later. The guy had the audacity to go to Lowe's for payment before the job was even done. Not only that, the Lowe's agreement was under my husband's name and paid via mail or auto deposit. Can't quite remember. After yelling at some poor cashier in the management, he told my husband that he was getting ripped off and needed more money. Note, my husband paid for any and all work materials and paid him weekly for work done. He thought he could just cut out the middleman and get paid from Lowe's. He ended up trying to hold the equipment hostage for more money. My husband ended up paying him something but wasn't near what he was asking. The guy then showed up to our house with his young daughter to threaten my husband. Now, my husband is a big man. He's over 6 feet 2 inches with years of martial arts, MMA, and rugby under his belt. He has mellowed dramatically since we've been together, but I know he's been in lots of fights over lesser reasons. We got our equipment and the guy got his last payment, but he was told that if he ever came to our house again, it wouldn't matter if he had his kid or not, he would get his butt kicked. My husband later lost the Lowe's contract, with this episode being the main reason. TLDR. Guy was given a chance to work, tried to cut out the middleman. My husband, his boss, ended up losing his job and costing us a big contract. I was only an assistant manager at the time and didn't fire her. I also didn't hire the dumb butt. I used to work for a local chain burger place. We tried to teach this girl to bag the fries at first because we only had 2 fried products and it should have been simple, but she kept licking her fingers before she would grab a fry carton. I continuously had to tell her to wash her hands and try again. Our district manager showed up that day and got so frustrated with her that he told her to go clean up the lot. She then almost got hit by 2 cars in the parking lot because she wasn't looking where she was going. She got fired that day. She got hired at the donut shop next door after that. I went to get donuts one day. She licked her fingers before she grabbed the bag to put my donuts in and gave me the wrong change back. My company does a numerous amount of things outside of structured cabling and telecommunications work, one being digital signage installation. We were installing signage as part of a countrywide project, and during a stint of stores out towards Nevada we received word from the manager of one of the locations that one of our techs was being rude. It came out later on that the manager had asked a minor question like, "How's the install going? What's the purpose of the signage?" Let's face it, not everyone is as informed as we like, even managers. Anyway, rather than explain calmly, he went off and initiated his part of the conversation with, "Mind your own freaking business." We dang near lost the project because of one person's lack of tact or self-control. He was fired rather quickly after being flown home hours after the incident. He got in 2 fender benders in 1 month. In a car he was driving that was the company's and on personal time. I took it away and he threw a fit and quit. Later found out he was smoking M, and that explains the rage. Just because you work overnights alone doesn't mean you can walk around in your underwear after getting caught and warned once already. New employee hired for basic administrative clerical role. Scan this, copy that, etc. After conversing with her, I find out it's her 7th job in the past 12 months. Whatever. We have a meeting with upper management. She is asked to come in and take notes for one of the VPs. Broke his hand and unable to write or type. About 10 minutes in, she slumps noticeably onto the desk to take a snooze. Mr. COO is surprised, politely asks her to wake up. Girl, without skipping a beat, flips Mr. COO the bird. She does not know Mr. COO is the vocal type. He drops a binder next to her head so she wakes up, snatches the notepad and tells her to GTFO loudly. They have a screaming match. She leaves with security. She came back around lunchtime with hammer. presumably to smash Mr. COO's car, but turned out to be Ms. CFO's new car. Turns out, Mrs. CFO is trained in some kind of martial arts. She grabs, now, ex-employee and throws her to the concrete ground. Ambulance is called. A VP says he will never pee off Ms. CFO again. Her 7th job in the past 12 months. Your HR department should be the next on the block if they miss this flag. Dealing drugs out of the back room of my bookstore was the deal breaker. 2 years later I still have people come in and leave quickly when they see it's not him behind the counter. Not me, but my dad's best friend owns a small bar in the center of my local city. He got offered a high-paying job somewhere else, so got someone else to manage and run his own bar. This guy is hosting a wedding after party thing and realizes he's run out of CO2 for his drinks halfway through. Now I don't know a lot about this sort of thing, but I know the logical thing would be to 1. Shut down the kegs all night, or 2. Try ring up and buy some quickly. Switch to cans bottles and offer some free shots or a discount to make up for it. Simple. This genius of a guy decides, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to connect a fire extinguisher up to the system. To the drinks that people are drinking at a wedding reception party thing. Surprisingly enough, people then complained that the drinks tasted awful and there was a massive backlash. He was then promptly fired when the owner found out. It was a wonder that no one got hurt. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.